G'day ZiggyD here, back with another video for the upcoming Path of Exile 3.30 Incursion League. A major change coming to the game in this new league is the complete rework of the Vaal Skills system. Vaal skill gems now also grant the regular version of the skill. This means that they can share the same support gems, making them a lot easier to fit into your builds. Vaal skills are still fueled by enemy souls, but the system has changed. Each Vaal skill has a cooldown after use before they can start receiving more souls. This means that you cannot chain their use in the way many Vaal Spark or Fireball builds once did. However, it also means that the power level of the skills could be increased and the soul requirements altered. Additionally, bosses now provide souls as they're damaged, meaning you can now use Vaal skills in all boss fights, potentially multiple times. And on top of these changes, most Vaal skills have been improved or completely reworked to better work alongside regular skills and to make them more impactful and worth using. To get some more insight into these changes and some info on some of the specific skills being reworked, I sat down to talk to Rory Rackham, who's been spending most of his time in the lead up to Incursion working on skill balance and the reworks.
We decided that it's now a good time, because of the theme of the league, that we want to also go back and visit Vaal Skills.
Yeah.
And we already wanted to redo some old skills, bring them up to the modern era of skills as well. So we just ended up cramming it all in, and we also wanted some new skills, just so there's entirely new things to play, something flashy, and so yeah, we ended up with 3 different sets of skills that we're all working on. So yeah.
The Vaal skill thing was a big one because they were pretty popular, and I really liked the mechanic of them, and I think a lot of people did like the mechanic of them, but it was only a few that people really used. A lot of them didn't get much use, and there was a lot of problems for you guys in terms of balance, well, with how they worked. Yeah,
there were a lot of limitations, one being that you had to get them from kills, so on boss fights you could only use them once and then they run out. They were limited because you had to keep charging them all the time, and if you sort of run out of souls, then the gem is a wasted gem. It's just sitting on your gear doing nothing, so it's really not worth investing a full 6 link in if you're just going to be using it a couple of times. And it also meant that if you could fully charge them constantly, then they weren't really Vaal skills. If the soul costs were low enough, then you could just cast them all day, so they may as well just be any other skill. So we kind of wanted to solve all those problems at once, and then revitalize the design of all these skills, make all of them feel like the ultimate skills that they should be.
So was that kind of the original intention when you guys first made them, for them to be this kind of like ultimate skill or a utility thing?
They were intended to be the ultimate skill, and we did what we could with the system, but over time we've got both better technology that we can use, and also just the skills in the game have become more powerful over time. So what was once an epic skill is now a pretty decent skill, but now we can bring it up to being really special again.
So how'd you arrive at the new kind of design for them, where there's a few interesting mechanics going on?
Yeah, we started off thinking, okay, we'll just do a couple of keystones on the tree. If you want to use Vaal skills, you take these keystones, and they did very similar things to what we ended up rolling into the skills themselves. We sort of said, okay, you can now generate souls on hitting bosses. We get soul regen when you're fighting, but we decided that having every character who wants to use a Vaal skill have to travel to do this, to use a skill on a boss, is not really what it should be. It should just be, if you want to use a Vaal skill, then you can use it in any situation. You can use it much more reliably. We didn't originally plan to have it so that both gems shared the Vaal and the non-Vaal version. That came about simply because we're like, okay, yeah, these are good, but we have to make them really crazy good to be worth slots on gear, and then characters who have access to 2 6-linked items, 2-handed weapon characters, and certain Elder Shaper uniques. Those are the only real ways to get the full power out of it, and what we had to balance around. So we didn't want to have to balance around that. We just wanted to say, yep, you can make your skill and your Vaal skill a primary skill all together at once, and we combined them into the one gem.
The change that might be, for some people, not like a bit more contentious because they played it in a certain way, is the one where you don't get charges now immediately, and it seems to be, from my play, a bit different for each skill, but you don't always get charges straight away.
The prime goal is there to make sure you can't just cast a Vaal skill over and over indefinitely. As fun as it was to occasionally be like, oh, excellent, it's fully charged up again, I can do it right away, it really meant that play felt really powerful until it ran out, and then it felt terrible. Keeping it so it's more something you want to alternate between, as well as having more Vaal skills that reward you for using it every now and then rather than constantly casting it as much as possible, sort of keeps it much more interesting, like much more active thinking playstyle rather than a just hold down whatever button is available at the time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've noticed is like having something that only comes up occasionally and not always necessarily consistently means you're paying a bit more attention to what and when you're using skill-wise. Was that kind of the idea there?
Yeah. It's a limitation that lets us put more power on them because they have that limitation now.
Yeah, that was my next question. Does having this cooldown thing allow you to be a little bit more liberal with what you can do?
Yeah, we can make it so they have lower soul costs so you don't need as many kills to pull them off, which is what we've done for almost every attack and damaging spell. And it also just means that it's we can put bigger numbers on the things that we know that you're not going to constantly use. Like, you're not going to have Vaal haste up the entirety of a boss fight now. You have to have moments where you're using it and moments where you're waiting for it to recharge.
Yeah, so you're fighting the boss, you get your charges, and then you wait for the moment when you're going to DPS when Shaper's doing his laser or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the one you were able to kind of buff up the most or be most liberal that you were held back with before because of the old design?
There are a few that we've just, not even because of that, just we've now have an excuse to turn the power up. It'd be dangerous doing it before, but now we can put really crazy numbers on some of these things, have them last for a decent long time because now there's a longer time where they can't recharge. So Vaal Lightning Strike is probably one of the coolest looking ones, definitely, where you're creating this orb and dropping it on a boss just means a lot of ongoing damage, which is really cool.
I noticed there's a few like that, Rain of Arrows, Lightning Strike, maybe even like Blade Vortex, which spawn kind of like an independently.
Yeah. Having a lot of them so that they have an ongoing effect. Even though they're not up all the time, they feel like they're doing something half the time. We've got a few that are still like big hit, one smash, destroy everything skills, but a lot of them are more like destroy everything in this area for an extended period of time, maybe even following you around or something like that.
So on that note then, let's talk about a few of the specific skills here. Arc and Vaal Arc as a pair.
Yeah, so Vaal Arc previously, if you remember it, just had a ridiculous number of chains. So most of the time it kind of did quite a few kills and then disappeared. Sometimes if you happen to have 3 tough enemies, it just went around in a circle for a long time, and that's the situation where it was really good, but it didn't really, it was already limited by soul cost. Now it's also limited by you really just want 3 guys and no more. So we've reworked it quite a bit. Now Vaal Arc just does, every time it chains, it also splits, so it bounces between enemies, spreading out to take out a huge
like a forking effect?
Yeah, it ends up just hitting almost everything in front of you as it splits between them. And we also gave it powerful shock effects, but we didn't feel like it was quite interesting enough, so we decided to add an ongoing effect. So when you use it for the next few seconds, your regular arc will also be empowered. Not quite as powerful as the Vaal Arc, but now every time it chains, it splits to 1 extra enemy, although that enemy won't chain. So we tried that out, and while we were playing it, we realized this is really how Arc should be by itself,
Always.
like all the time. So we just dropped that part of Vaal Arc, and now Arc just also bounces to an extra enemy every time it chains. Felt like how it should be.
I feel like that's a good example of both skill and Vaal skill that are just were pretty ancient these days compared to a lot of the skills we have. You know, you get an arc and it chains to a couple of extra mobs, but compared to some of the AoE things and repeating effects we have on other skills.
Yeah, so we're probably going to add back another ongoing effect to Vaal Arc, but we haven't worked out what yet. So we just wasted it on putting it on regular arcs. So
just wasted by making the base skill better.
Yeah.
What a waste. So even more to expect in terms of polishing up Vaal Arc and making it exciting to use.
Yeah. There's 2 kind of directions. We can have an ongoing effect, or we could just make it so you can cast it a lot more frequently, because almost all the Vaal spells have 1 charge, and you've got 1 big cast for them, because they're generally much more powerful, while the Vaal attacks have multiple charges, so you can use them multiple times. But maybe Vaal Arc will be the exception. We'll see.
And I imagine you guys have to work around the idea that I could cast my Vaal skill, but am I better off just holding down my main skill here to get more damage out? So I guess having those buffing effects and other ongoing effects and things like that are a way to achieve that. We
also don't want to make it so having the Vaal skill is the only way that feels good with that regular skill, so it's a bit of a tough choice, but there are advantages. There's small numerical advantages not using the Vaal skill, just getting a +1 level gem. But
that could be a situation of like Fireball compared to Vaal Fireball, where the Vaal Fireball feels like the difference between the feel of the 2 skills is so great that it makes it, you want to be using Vaal Fireball as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah. We tried to also make it so that the two skills are quite close together in terms of supportability. So there are some examples of supports like Multi-Strike and Echo that don't apply to the Vaal version, and that kind of changes how you want to support the skill if you're wanting to get the most out of your Vaal Arc, your Vaal Fireball, and we're balancing the damage values on them to accommodate for that. But it's also that we've redesigned a few of the Vaal skills so they share more of their support gems, like Vaal Righteous Fire now applies a burning dot to enemies for a duration, so all the burning damage modifiers that you would apply to regular Righteous Fire will now apply to the Vaal Righteous Fire as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense compared to before, where it was basically a completely different skill and you use it on a pretty different build. But now you've got kind of a synergy between the two.
Especially as Dark Pact ended up kind of achieving a similar play style to Vaal Righteous Fire without killing you most of the time. So, yeah.
That's for the hit. Not the immediate death situation. So the other one that kind of caught my attention, which I haven't had a chance to look at too much yet, but are the Vaal Impurities. So tell me a little bit about those and how they came about.
We wanted to introduce more Vaal auras as a general. I don't have a specific skill I want to use, but I want to use a Vaal power-up. Sort of like Vaal Haste is very widely used because it works with a lot of things.
Right,
we just added the Impurities as an extra thing. It's one of the few auras, the only aura that has both an offensive and defensive effect while it's active. So it protects you from that element by quite a large damage reduction value. It's not resist, it's actual reduced damage taken, so it stacks on top of max res and all that sort of stuff. And we also made it so it prevents enemies resisting hits of that type. So with the Vaal Impurity of Fire, it's just they can't resist their fire damage. We didn't have it work on damage over time simply because the Inquisitor already kind of had that power. We didn't want to, well, he has the hit, ignoring resists on hit. We didn't want to include degen on this as well and make him feel like the less powerful version of the effect. But yeah, we originally had them designed for an item, but we ended up saying, well, they make sense to release as full skills, so we've just brought them out as full.
So you don't need to actually use the regular aura if you want to use this, though, because it might not always make sense.
Yeah, you don't need to have it active. It will be there if you want to turn it on, but if you're wanting to use different auras, if you don't want the reservation cost, you can just use the Vaal version of the skill. The same for Vaal Haste. You don't need Haste active to use your Vaal Haste now. So we had an original plan for Vaal Cold Snap where it would create a large area where you're constantly taking cold damage over time and you're constantly chilled in that area, like a large vortex effect. And then as we iterated on that, we ended up applying that to regular Cold Snap as well, mostly just because it looked so much better and so much more oppressive. And then we added additional mechanics on top of that to Cold Snap. We've actually made a fairly large change to Cold Snap we're trying out, where it's all about frenzy charges rather than power charges now. So you can expend frenzy charges to bypass the cooldown, but also if something dies in that chilling ground area, that frozen terrain, then you will get frenzy charges from it.
That makes more sense with the pairing with cold with frenzy.
Yeah, and it's sort of one of the first spells that's about frenzy charges, unless you include Blood Rage. So, so it's doing something different. Although the Threshold Jewel will now return it to power charges with some extra bonuses. If you really like the power charge mechanic, you can go back to it.
If you wanted to use a Ramirez setup, kind of old school style. Okay, so that was a big one, because that's been a pretty difficult skill to like both build around and to balance over time. I think like a lot of the time it's always kind of, most of the time it's erred on being on the weaker side, I think. Maybe it was something you guys were worried about. It
was originally sort of, when we re-leveled or changed the levels of all the gems, we put it to level 4 as the sort of support skill for cold characters. But then we also had Frost Bomb, which is much more of a support skill because it strips away cold resists. So that didn't really have a place as a support skill. We tried making it a damage skill, just standalone damage skill, but it felt kind of boring compared to the other more interesting, crazy spells we've had. So we decided we'll make it a support skill, but we'll make it a charge support skill. So it's sort of like the Assassin's Mark sort of thing, but in a different way of applying it.
Yeah, it always felt like one of those skills that was like from the early days of PoE, in terms of like we want to create this kind of new kind of cooldown, but later on that just kind of didn't end up working so much, and the idea was better done by Vaal Skills effectively.
Yeah. It was also like way back when the design was, it chills and freezes everything in that area. But the more complex boss fights we made, the more like we can't let you freeze everything all the time. That's no good. Yeah.
So now that it supports itself, it's something that. To what point did you, I guess, balance that? Is the interesting question. Is that something that you can effectively just take and go with, or do you still need to build to get more frenzy charges or something like that to help that out?
Definitely when you first pick it up, the intent is that you're casting it in between your other skills to keep your frenzy charges active, and maybe if you want to deploy it for some extra damage, you can expend a frenzy charge, but it's sort of a risky cost. But later on, you should be able to just drop it all over the place by generating frenzy charges in clever ways. We've changed the hypothermia, I believe it is, the support gem that interacts with charges and shield enemies, so that also increases cold damage over time of supported skills, so that's worth using with it as well.
So is it like generating charges based on mobs that just die in the area from any other hit or anything like
yes,
that?
that's the plan.
That does give it a much more of a support effect if you want to take it that route.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm asking a lot about Cold Snap because I've always loved the skill, but it's so rare to be able to kind of pull it off in a build that feels really good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good news.
Yeah, and it's still experimental. We'll be testing it out, and it'll hopefully be on alpha soon, so we can get some real player feedback. But yeah, it should be interesting.
I'm personally really excited about these changes. I always felt that Vaal Skills had the potential to significantly improve the feel and flow of Path of Exile's combat by giving punchy, powerful skills to use intermittently, or by allowing us to use more skills in different situations, improving the one-button gameplay that Path of Exile can sometimes devolve into. Unfortunately, however, most were not worth using due to power level or gem socket limitations, and the others that were worth using devolved into spammy, degenerate balancing nightmares. With these changes, I think most builds that have a relevant Vaal skill will use it, and they'll weave into regular gameplay in a fun way. I suspect this is actually going to be a bigger improvement to the combat feel of Path of Exile than you might even think. I might be overhyping it potentially, but a Vaal skill rework like this has been a long time coming, and based on what I played while at the GGG studio, they're going to be very fun to use. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.